Alright. I think everything is up and running. Just making sure I have all my water and stuff so I don't have to go and run and get it. I think we are good. Oh, let me go ahead and load up the chill stream layout and we'll sort of get started. Turn on the BGM. I'm going to leave the BGM about here for now. As folks sort of filter in, I'll adjust it up or down as necessary. I haven't run a chill stream in a bit, and I've moved my settings around, so I'll rely on the folks tuning in to let me know if I need to make the BGM louder, because I'd rather it be too soft than overpowering me on the mic here. On the topic of BGM stuff, the songs playing in the background, for folks who might not have been to one of these before, all comes from the BGM project that we've created using my loop station and some collaboration with chat. And for today, because I keep forgetting to do it, I added 4 new tracks that are part of the second BGM pack, which is currently in progress. And Shuffling Horn's one of them. So as the whole playlist sort of randomizes and repeats, you folks might hear some new songs that haven't been featured so far. Hey, Wazzy's here. Wazzy says, sounds good. On to the bad takes. Yes. There will be many bad takes today. So let's see, what we can do is switch over. Well, first I want to give some sort of updates and things that are on the horizon for streaming. Since I usually do a little bit of a kind of an update and intro stuff to the chill streams before we jump into the bad takes. So I'm right now finalizing the stream schedule for next week. I think next week's not going to be unusual, but it's going to be a 4-stream week, I think. I need to play around with the dates. But I think the one that I set and I was working on late last night was Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday. I may move the Wednesday one to Tuesday if I can get to a stream earlier. But there'll be some interesting stuff next week. On Monday, tomorrow, I'm going to be streaming something new, video game-wise, that I was talking about last week that I really would like to show off to everybody. So if you want to see what Vampire Survivors looks like, if you're hearing me talk about it for a couple streams, that will be tomorrow. I will be breaking down how the game works and trying to get farther and unlock stuff. So that'll be tomorrow afternoon. I believe the time I set was 3 p.m. Pacific. The stream schedule will go up later this evening once I finish working on it. Other than that, everything else will be continuing as normal. There'll be a Monster Hunter Rise stream next week. I don't know if I'll have a co-host yet. I have to figure that out. God Hand, of course, will continue on Thursdays. I also need to figure out the co-host situation for that, but if Wazzy's available, she gets first pick of the time slot since Matt was here last week. And then Saturday should be a jam stream. Hopefully, I can finish recording new BGM stuff between now and then, and maybe we can demo them on stream. That's something I've been meaning to do, but I've been kind of busy. There's a whole bunch of new tracks that I need to record and start organizing. So hopefully I can do that by the jam stream, and then we'll take a look. Well, those are the only major updates. Not a whole lot going on. Just continuing to grind. Let's see. Let me make sure everything looks good on the tier list layout. We'll go ahead and switch Wazzy asks, am I solo on God Hand? Because I have a surprise if I'm allowed. Yeah, so the co-host slot for this, or for next week, would be just one person. I think the next 3-person chaos stream will be the end of the game. And I know about where I need to break in the stream to make sure we have enough time to do the end of God Hand. So for you and Matt, that'll be basically the last session I expect us to do. And I think that'll be a good way to cap everything off, because I do think it'd be fun for you guys to see how the end of the game looks. But yeah, we'll talk about it later. It's only Sunday, so we can coordinate everything. But yeah, that's fine. I don't think people are going to be surprised just watching the stream, since you guys have been pretty consistently co-hosting so far. So it's all good. All right, let's see. Tier lists. Okay. This is a slightly updated version of the tier list layout. It's going to look almost identical to the one to the one I was using before. Oh, voice crack. It just has the chat for the archives now. So all of the wacky things that people say will show up in the chat. And I'll need to make sure I have it sized correctly, but it should be fine. So the topic of today's chill stream, and this latest episode of Raku Ranks, is focused around video games. And this first one that we're going to look at is video game consoles. And this would be a good warm-up one, I think, just to sort of get back into the swing of reviewing things and expressing my terrible opinions. And then there's going to be a bigger one after this, which is something I'm pretty passionate about, and hopefully some of the folks that tune in will find interesting in the realm of video games. And then we'll see how long it takes. I think the second one's probably going to take a little bit longer than this first one. But what we'll do is switch to presentation mode. And as always, I'll try and shout out the people who created these on the tier maker site. This one was created by Side Order of Lems. Side Order of Lems on Twitter. And this is video game consoles. And let's see how it's laid out. The problem with this one, which is going to be amusing, and I'm going to need to give myself another browser window here. I don't know all of these consoles just by their image. I really wish it had a little thing in the corner that would say what console it is, because some of the older ones I don't know just by image, but most of those I haven't played, so I think it'll be fine if I just put them in the haven't played category. So we'll do what we did before and separate all the ones that aren't going to be ranked. So this one I don't recognize. This is a portable. That might be a Japan console. Let's see. This one, I know there's probably a CDI on here, but that one, that one's more like, it looks almost like a VCR for folks who know what VCRs are. Either way, haven't played it. That's Jaguar, I think. This one right here, that's an Atari. I think it's a 3200. What I'm going to do on my other screen here is I'll Google images of these, so I'm accurately commenting on them. So let's see, Atari 3600 or 3200. No. According to this is a 3200. That's according to Google. Let's see. Oh, this might be a 5200. Yeah, this one's 5200 up here. Either way, I've only played a 2600. I don't think there is a 3200. There might be. I don't know. Oh, the 3200 looks like it's brown and shaped almost kind of like a PS3. It's got 8 ports on the front. I don't even see that one on the list here. But 2600. That's this one. So this is the one I have played. Let's see. Is this a Sega Saturn? This is not a Sega Saturn. It's close in shape though, that square sort of box. But it doesn't look like it just from the screenshot. Unless it's a different model. Hey, Iconic Boar's here. What's up, Iconic? How you doing today, man? We're starting off today's Bad Opinion stream with ranking video game consoles. And I'm trying to separate out on the list the ones I haven't played. Maybe it is a Saturn. It could be a different model. Either way, I haven't played it, so I'm putting it on here. Iconic says, hope you're good. I'm good. I was up a little too late last night for planning purposes, but other than that, I am ready to be canceled for my bad opinions. Alright, this one, that's a Game Gear, I'm pretty sure. Sega Game Gear. Yes. Thought that looked familiar. Vita. What's this? This is another one of the old. Is that the Atari? Or not the Jaguar Portable? What was it called? I know there was a portable system that was supposed to compete with the Game Boy. What was it called? Wazzy has a good question. Wazzy asks, how are you ranking them on the console attributes, games that came out on them? Like, what's the terms? Okay, that's a good question. So I am ranking these based on my personal preference of the game library, the functionality of the hardware, and the overall time spent playing them. So to me, the quality of the library is probably going to weigh the heaviest, since it's not necessarily fair to compare these on a technical or hardware level for, let's say, processing power, because if that was the case, then the newer gen stuff would all be at the top and the old gen would be at the bottom. So it's personal significance to me based on what I played. So I'm only including systems in the ranking that I've played. That's why I'm filtering out the stuff that I haven't. And so based on the games I played on the library, that's going to determine where I put them on the list. Oh, here's the Saturn down here. So that's a good question. If I haven't touched the console, then that's why it's not being rated. Let's see. This one. Okay, Saturn, PlayStation. I'm going to assume this is Switch. This is a weird image to show. I think it's just the tablet of the Switch without any Joy-Cons. And let's see. This is TurboGrafx 16, I think? Turbo. Yes, I recognize that weird little card slot it had. Oh, is this... What's Neogeo look like? Aha, that's what this is. Unfortunately, the screen is zoomed so far out that I couldn't read the thing on top. The Neogeo has a really similar shape to the Saturn, which is over here. Then we got Wii U, and this is 360. And this one, this is the old Sega, is it Master System? Oh no, that's this one. Which one is that the 32X? No, Sega 32X was the thing that sat on top. Let's see if we can find it. Oh, this is the Genesis. That's one of the early model Genesises. I wonder it didn't look familiar. I'm used to seeing one of the later iterations of the Sega Genesis, not this one. It says 16-bit on top. It's fuzzy and you can't see it. But yeah, that's why. I was going to say, that'd be a big omission to not have the Genesis on this list. So yeah, that's it here. What is this? Genesi? Is that the plural of Genesis? Genesis? I'm surprised the other iterations of the Game Boy weren't included on here. Because you got the original, the Advance, but I don't see the Game Boy Color or Game Boy Pocket or Game Boy SP. Because I would consider the iterations of the hardware significant. Even though I guess the games would have been the same on there. Like there's no, this is the regular DS. There's no DS XL or DSi. There's just the regular one and the 3DS over here. And there's no 3DS XL. And I think that's it. Why are there two 360s? Or this is the Xbox One, isn't it? This is the Xbox One X, or I hate the naming scheme for the Xbox platforms. Xbox One. The X-Bone. Oh. This is 360 Slim? This isn't an Xbox One, the base model of that gen. I don't see that one on here. So here's the latest one, latest version of the Xbox consoles down here. But I don't see the one that came before it and after the 360. That's weird. Oh no, that's it here. Never mind. First I thought it was a Kinect, and then I realized it was it's the Xbox One base model with a controller. It looks like a Kinect. Iconic says yes, it's a 360 Slim. Okay, base 360, 360 Slim. Hey, Sour Lad's here. Sour Lad says hello, gamers. And Iconic says it was dumb. 360 Slim. Yeah, I never had one of those. I will talk through all the consoles I've owned. I haven't owned all of these, but I've played enough games on them to be able to rate them for the sake of the tier list. So we will go ahead and jump right into it. We'll go down the list. I'll leave the ones I haven't played down here visible, just because there's not a lot of them. We won't stretch the tier list out. Wazzy says, can't believe Sour Lad is alive. What happened to Sour Lad? Why wouldn't he be alive? I may be missing a key lore bit here. But either way, we're glad Sour Lad is here, as usual. Also, for folks that are tuning in, I mentioned this earlier on a previous stream. And I can't remember if I mentioned it to everybody, but Wazzy is now a mod. You can tell because she has the powerful icon of Doom next to her name, so she is officially a mod on my channel. And she's assured me she won't go mad with power, but we shall see. And Wazzy says he lost his phone and died? He lost his phone and the phone died? Or he lost his phone and he died? Either, either way, losing phone is no good. Iconic says, I congratulate her, like you said. Oh, very good, man. Wazzy says, I'm banning you all. I think we checked before whether or not she could create polls. Because I'm not affiliated, I don't think I have the function or my mods. But when I do, I'm sure there will be shenanigans. Alright, so first up on the list here, we are ranking the original Game Boy. And I owned an original Game Boy. I don't anymore because it stopped working and I got rid of it. I sold it. The original Game Boy was revolutionary for mobile games, portable games rather. And there were other portable systems in Japan, but in the rest of the world, specifically the West, Game Boy was pretty important for being able to play games on the go. So I'm going to put the Game Boy up on high B tier. Sourlad says I had 2FA on my account and the code that gets sent goes to my stolen phone. Uh-oh. Are you able to log into it now since you're here? Because I'm assuming you fixed it if you're able to log in now, but that's no good. Wazzy says, I can only time out and ban right now. And then she says, he phoned and died, his lost. Okay. Yeah, it's always a pain when there's problems with accounts, but it would be really unfortunate if you were to lose your phone. But the reason why I'm putting the Game Boy up here is because while I think it's very important when it comes to moving portable gaming forward and being sort of the starting point, it wasn't the iteration of the hardware that I used the most. Of the Game Boy generation of things, it probably would have been the Pocket. I never had a Game Boy Color, so I wouldn't be able to put that on the list. But I really liked the Game Boy Pocket. It was portable, had a better screen with a sharper resolution, and when it came to things that were big on the system like Pokemon, I'm old enough to have played the original Pokemon games when they came out on Game Boy, and I played them on the Pocket. I had a black one. My brother had a blue one, I think. And there were some really good games on the original Game Boy library. I remember playing the first Dragon Warrior Monsters on that as well, and playing it almost as much as Pokemon. Then over time, I think I started playing those games more. Obviously, there was Mario Land, Mario Land 2. Was it the one with the 6 golden coins, 12 golden coins? There was that. I never played Link's Awakening on the original Game Boy. I played that one a bit later. Sour Lad says, I got my old phone working and the new one is gone forever. That sucks, Sour Lad. Iconic says, fun fact, there was an original Game Boy that survived a bombing and it's in a museum. The original Game Boy was a tank of a piece of hardware. It could take a lot of physical abuse and still work. The one we had never got super beat up, but I remember reading stories of like people getting them frozen by accident, like they left it out in the snow or a car ran over it, and as long as the screen didn't get crushed, all of the core processor parts in the housing would allow it to run no matter what. It was a very durable piece of hardware. So that's definitely a plus. Wazzy says, did you have a link cable? Yes, because my brother and I played Pokemon. We had a link cable to be able to trade Pokemon. That was pretty much all we used it for because we didn't really play a lot of co-op games back in the day. In fact, I think Pokemon might have been the first one that we played where we actually connected the two Game Boys. And for those that aren't old enough to remember, the old portable Game Boys, all the way up through the SP prior to the DS, had to be hardwired together with a cable in order to do anything multiplayer, whether it's co-op or things like trading Pokemon or whatnot. You had this little 2.5-foot cable that you had to connect each unit and basically be really close to somebody in order to have them connect. There was no wireless capability. Wireless wasn't even invented when this particular piece of equipment came out. Iconic says, indeed it was. Sourlad says, I guess Nintendo got the Nokia formula. For those old pieces of hardware, definitely. They were pretty durable. Yeah, Edward's here. Edward says, I haven't heard anything yet, but hashtag canceled. Yep. I'm sure I will get canceled today. So as far as Game Boy goes, I'd put the original up here. Pocket would probably be higher, like one slot higher on the tier list. Maybe A tier, I'm not sure. Spent a lot of time on handheld. Next up we have the GameCube. One of the forgotten console era systems, in my opinion. I think I talked about it before, but I never owned a GameCube. I took a pretty big leap across the consoles and things I owned before I started eventually owning most of the ones that were out. But I played a lot of things on GameCube at other people's houses, and I played enough to be able to rate the system. So I'm going to put the GameCube on lower B tier for me. It's a really good system, and it has some very, very classic games, but they weren't games that I played. And just because I didn't play them doesn't mean I'm going to knock the system down in points. So it's... In fact, I'm going to put it higher than the Game Boy because there's some really good things on here. Things like the Metroid Prime series. Things like RE4, which was the first or second time I played RE was on GameCube. I played Killer 7 eventually on the GameCube. And obviously the proprietary Nintendo titles and things like Melee. It's a good system. It's just a shame it wasn't marketed too well because I only knew one person who had one. And you think it would have been more popular. Sour Lad says, Nintendo was late on the CD trend and died, I guess. I think it was that, and they also didn't market it too aggressively for some reason, because the GameCube was competing with the original Xbox, from what I remember. Dates might be somewhat fuzzy, but it was also competing with the PlayStation 2 over here. And the PlayStation 2 library was insane. There was so much on there, and Nintendo had some third-party stuff, but it was mostly their first-party titles that really carried the system, and I think they just got in too late. Which is a shame, because again, GameCube was a good system. It just, timing-wise, didn't pan out, and we're going to see that with some other ones on here, like the Dreamcast. Or, let's see, to some extent, the Saturn. Wazzy says, okay, but can we just appreciate the way PlayStation names? Nintendo always got to have some ridiculous name. Xbox has an obsession with numbers and letters that aren't in order. I agree. I think PlayStation is good at not reinventing the wheel when it comes to distinguishing their platforms. If anything, theirs look kind of similar in design, but as far as separating the models out, like Wazzy's saying, you have numbers 1 through 5. Pretty simple. I noticed the PSX isn't on here though. Let's see. Unless that's this one. This, because there are two models of the PlayStation 1. This is, according to Google, this is the PSX. Let's see, PlayStation 1. I know there's a different version of this I'm thinking of. Might have just been slightly different shaped unit. It was more rounded. That's what I remember. Instead of the kind of rectangular box like down here. For the sake of ranking, we're going to just call it the PlayStation 1, and that'll be fine. Oh, let's see. Wazzy says, also, boss, your chat box isn't working like behind your head. That's probably because I have it on my layout, but I forgot to add Twitch chat, so my bad. It was working on the chill stream, but not here. Thank you, Wazzy. Let's see. I'm just going to shrink this down a little. It's going to be slightly cut off, but that's okay. I don't have a good way to put the entire chat on there, but now people can see it. I haven't been looking at OBS, so I would have noticed it sooner, but Wazzy says, sorry, I didn't comprehend until just now. Oh, it's all good. Thanks for pointing it out. Now my imminent cancellation will be documented for everybody. Iconic says, hi, YouTube. That's right. The first 15 to 20 minutes of today's stream will be a mystery to everyone who's watching. They'll just have to go by what I'm saying. Wazzy says, hey, YouTube, you suck. Well, not the people watching, but the platform itself. Yes, we can definitely debate that all day. All right. So next up, we got PS2. PS2 and PS2 Slim. Interesting that they put both models in the shot here. PS2 is going on S tier for me. It's one of my favorite consoles. Iconic says, Raku talks about consoles to no one. That's right. There's no way to prove it. The only way would be to watch the Twitch VOD. But that's okay. Now there's proof that I'm not just screaming into the void by myself. Iconic says, yeah, PS2 is GOAT. I really like the PS2. If we were to track back through my history with owning consoles, I had a Nintendo, Super Nintendo, and then I went to PS2. I played a bunch of stuff in between. I just never owned the consoles. So ownership-wise, this was the third one I ever got. And I bought this one with my own money. Versus these two were gifts when I was a wee larva on Homeworld. But the PS2 has an undeniably awesome library. Edward says, Raku, the crash was 10 years ago. You have to let go. What, 2012? Which crash? That's funny. I'm just keeping an eye on the BGM. Let me know if you guys can't hear it, but it should still be barely audible in the background, and that's fine. Oh, I see. Wazzy says the crash where we all died. We're all ghosts. Hopefully not. But on the topic of the PS2, this system had a lot of really influential games in general, but a lot of my all-time favorites I played on this system, and there was a lot of them. If you talked about God Hand alone would put the PS2 very high up, but there were also a lot of other good games in different genres on here. Just thinking off the top of my head, obviously Killer 7, DMC 3, a lot of rhythm games. I played a lot of import rhythm games on a modded PS2. Let's see. SMT. I got into SMT series on PS2 with Nocturne and then P3. Iconic says, what if Raku was a ghost and we were all staring at nothing? That's ridiculous. I can't even imagine such an outlandishly preposterous notion, Iconic. I have no idea what you're talking about. Wazzy says, maybe if you didn't stay up till 4 a.m. playing Pixel Twilight, you'd get our rad jokes. Yeah, more on that tomorrow. Boop. Sarlat says GTA. I've never really played GTA as a series, but I know it started on the older consoles. It was GTA. Was it 4 or 3? It was the one with the Russian guy, right? I think that one was on PlayStation 2. Somebody correct me because I haven't played the games, but yeah, so many series I got started in liking were here. So yeah, I don't think anyone's gonna really contest putting that one up high. Next up, the Genesis. I never owned a Genesis, but I did play it a lot at other people's houses or in video game stores where they'd have the demo thing set up. As a result, I am not super attached to the library of first-party Sega properties like Sonic and whatnot, but the Genesis is a good system. There's some really good stuff on here. So I'm going to put the Genesis up on higher B tier, higher than the GameCube to me, just because some of the more standout properties I remember. While this is time for Matrix, everyone take your pills. Edward says, Raku, let's go bowling. Sorry, cousin, not today. Sarlat says, I have minus 20 knowledge on PlayStation. Is that for any of the PlayStation earlier consoles or just the original? I guess we'll find out. But as far as significance, the library on Genesis was very good. In fact, I'm tempted to put it on A just because, again, it's not solely based on my personal experience with it. I think I will do that because even if I didn't play a ton of things on it, there's a lot of good stuff that came from the Genesis era. Obviously, Sonic, a whole bunch of kind of unique action games too. One of my favorite games from the Genesis era is a game called Alien Soldier, and that was one that I didn't play until it was ported to the Wii Virtual Console. And that's a really fun game. If I can find a way to play that on stream, maybe I will. It's a nutty kind of like action side-scrolling shooter-ish game. It's hard to describe. You play an alien Birdman. It's really cool. But yeah, Genesis is solid. I actually have one of the re-released retro consoles for Genesis that has all of the games on it, kind of like the classic. That's what it is. I haven't plugged it in. It's still in its box. But, yeah, good system. Sour Lad says, I only know very few games from the PlayStation. Yeah, I never owned a PlayStation first generation, but I did play a decent amount of things on it. So we'll get there. I get a feeling that this one's going to be a little contentious for me. But these are overall ratings, not just purely based on my preference. So we will move on. PlayStation 3. PlayStation 3 is also interesting. This might be the console I own the least amount of games for. And it's the way I got a PS3 is kind of an interesting story because it's different from probably everybody else who owns one. Game library wise, I'm going to put the PlayStation 3 on mid B tier overall. And I'll have to explain this a little bit because this is a good system. PlayStation 3 was great. The problem is its competing console at the time was the 360, and by proxy the 360 Slim. I'm gonna rate these two together when I get there in the list. I owned a 360 first, and games that weren't exclusive to PS3 and were on both, I played on 360 primarily. I had a ton of 360 games. Between my roommate at the time and myself, we had a ton of them, and we played the system more. Walty says I played Duke Nukem, Spyro, and wrestling games on the PS1. Oh, interesting. I played Duke Nukem on the PC. So you would have played a later version that was ported to PlayStation. Kind of like what they did with the older computer games like Diablo and StarCraft. I think those were both ported to PlayStation and Nintendo 64, and they were kind of jank. They didn't really run quite like the computer versions. It might have been Doom, one of the Dooms, maybe 2 on PlayStation. I don't remember. They ported that to everything. But for the PS3, I got a PS3 very late in its life cycle. The PS4 wasn't on the horizon yet, but it is in the last third of the lifespan of the PS3. And the one I got was a later model. The first run of PS3s were the ones that had backwards compatibility with PS2, I believe. Someone else can fact check that. I know the first production run had backwards compatibility and they removed it because Sony are a bunch of morons. But I got a late model one, so it couldn't play PS2 games, I think. But the reason I got a PS3 was, one, because it had been out for a while and it was a little cheaper. And 2, because I had friends on, what do they call the service? Ad Hoc Party, I think is what they called it. And I had friends that played Monster Hunter. This was after I got into Monster Hunter, and I had some friends, like my original friend who got me into the game. We're playing Freedom Unite on PSP. And is PSP on here? This is Vita. Huh. No PSP? Oh no, this is the Vita. This must be the PSP. Anyway, we were playing Freedom Unite, and the PS3 had a multiplayer thing you could hook in called Ad Hoc Party, and you could basically hook up things like a PSP and play co-op games with people through that service. And I don't think it didn't cost anything. It was basically just a free thing that you could do. So I'd play with my friend who lived in my state and one of my other really good friends who lived in Canada, and we'd all get on and play Monster Hunter via PS3. And so I primarily bought it for that. I picked up some of their virtual console, like PlayStation Hits, whatever they called it, where you could get old games on the system, and that's how I ended up buying a version of God Hand on PS3. It was like $10. And the other thing I picked up was Disgaea 3, I think. Walsey says, anybody surprised by Monster Hunter? No. I doubt anyone's surprised that I bought a console for Monster Hunter. But yeah, I do not own a lot of titles for the PS3, but it's a good system. There were a lot of good RPGs and a lot of other things at the time. But the problem was I own the majority of the things from that console iteration on 360. Because it was what we primarily played on. Sour Lad says, what about the controllers? That is going to be a topic for another day, Sour Lad, because I have another tier list I don't think we're going to get to today. But it's all video game controllers. And I think it's up through PS5. I'd have to look at it, but there's a separate tier list we're going to do for game controllers. But yes, that we're gonna get to that eventually. That'll be an interesting discussion too. Wazzy says, wait, so you know Canadians? Why did you not know any Canadian words? I didn't really talk to my Canadian friend via voice too much. This was way back before Discord. What did we use? We used Ventrilo for some things later, like when we were playing on the Wii for Monster Hunter. But when we were playing on the PS3, PS3 via ad hoc party. We were using, what were we using? It wasn't AIM, before anybody asks. This was after that. We might have been using the in-game messaging system because we didn't have a separate voice program we used at the time. Maybe we had voice chat connected through the ad hoc party. You could do that too. You could create groups and everyone could use a mic and a headset. But this friend of mine, I can't remember where he's from. He might be from, I don't think he's from Toronto. I don't know. But we didn't talk a whole lot, so I didn't really pick up any Canadian words from him. That particular dude was someone that I played Monster Hunter with for like 1 or 2 years, and then he came to a PAX, and I got to meet him in person, and he hung out with all of us for a couple different PAXs, and we ended up playing a lot of Monster Hunter in person, which was pretty fun. Yeah, I can see what that guy's been up to. I wonder if he picked up Rise on PC. But yeah, so PS3's going here. Good system. I personally didn't play a lot on it, but there's good titles on it. All right, next up we have one of the pillars of the old school game consoles, the NES, the first console I ever owned, way back in the day. NES is going up pretty high on the list. That's gonna go A tier for me. I'm gonna put it above the Genesis because I have more history with this one, and I feel like its library was a bit more historic to me. These both are kind of going to occupy a similar tier as far as overall gaming significance, but my history with this one is going to put it up higher on the list. Iconic says N64 Controller F tier easy, while he says Wiimotes F tier. Nintendo 64 controller's not great, and I say that as someone who never owned one but played a decent amount of games on it. The idea of ergonomics and comfort was definitely not the highest priority when they designed the 64 controller. It's a neat idea, but it was pretty durable too. We beat the daylights out of a bunch of those in Earth School playing Smash. So I guess technically I did own a 64, but it was much later. We were playing 64 Smash when Melee was out, just because we liked it better. But the idea that you don't have 3 hands, like Edward's saying, is so bizarre for how you would design a console, where you have to switch central grips just to be able to hit all the buttons. It's very bizarre. But yes, we will get to controllers at some point in the future. In fact, before I found the next tier list we're gonna do, I was gonna do controllers, but the one after this is a bit more interesting to me, so that's how we're doing it. But yeah, as far as justification for putting the original 8-bit NES up here, there's so many properties I love on that system. To me, it's a classic, and a lot of the stuff on there still holds up really well. You could put in Mega Man 2, or the original Legend of Zelda, or Mario 3, and all those games hold up very well nowadays. And I did pick up one of the re-release classics for the NES. I don't think I've opened that one either. And it's got a good selection of games. No Blaster Master, though. I'm pretty sure that one wasn't on there. That made me sad. Walsey says to Edward, I didn't inherit them, Dad, in response to the 3 hands. Indeed. Alright, next up, Super Nintendo. Super Nintendo is going at the top of S tier, above the PlayStation 2 for me. This one's also balanced by its library and my personal history. Super Nintendo is the most impactful system on my quote-unquote gaming career. I played a ton on NES, but I was a bit younger as a larva on Homeworld for our imported video game systems from Earth. I did play a lot of stuff on here, but I didn't appreciate the 8-bit library until I was a little bit older. I was a bit older when I started playing the Super Nintendo, and that was a couple years into its lifespan. But there's stuff on here that I'll talk about that really affected the way I would look at games and my preferences going forward. Edward says, "Well, sorry I married a one-handed woman." Sourlad says, "SNES just improved the NES in games." Wazzy says, "I am now a freak." Yeah, Sourlad's right. The Super Nintendo pushed the entire system and series of Nintendo consoles into the 30 or 62-bit generation, competing with the Genesis essentially. But for me, the games on the system were very different in forming my tastes in video games than the NES. I played a little bit of everything on NES. Things like your action games, platformer games. But the one series of games I never played on the NES were RPGs. I missed the first Final Fantasy and Final Fantasy 2. I can't remember if that came out on Nintendo. The only RPG I sort of played briefly was Dragon Warrior, the very first one in the Dragon Quest series. But Super Nintendo is where I got into RPGs, specifically JRPGs. And to me, it's the golden era of classic JRPGs and even non-Japanese RPGs in general is one of the most standout things of the Super Nintendo library. I could think of so many games that were iconic just in the JRPG lineup outside of the other big hits you had. One of my favorite games of all time is Chrono Trigger. And Chrono Trigger was something I experienced for the first time on Super Nintendo. You have Final Fantasy VI or Final Fantasy III in the West. You had Secret of Mana, Secret of Evermore, Lufia, Lufia 2, Breath of Fire, Breath of Fire 2. Breath of Fire 2 is my favorite RPG on the Super Nintendo. I don't know if Tales of Fantasia was Japan only until they ported it to Advance. I think it's technically Star Ocean was also on Super Nintendo. One of the early Star Oceans, I believe. I didn't play it, but so many good RPGs. And that was what caused me to get into them. Outside of just RPGs, Iconic says, iconic you say. Yep. You had first party Nintendo titles, third party titles. Obviously, Super Mario World, really good game. I prefer Super Mario World 2, Yoshi's Island. I really like the style and presentation of that game. Yeah, it's Super Metroid. Super Metroid's really, really good and stands up very well nowadays. I don't think Penguin is here, but the Punch Out series, you had Super Punch Out on Super Nintendo. Everything was Super back then. If you're going to create a title on that system, you had to put Super in front of the name. You had Mega Man X. Mega Man X 1, 2, and 3. Classic games. The first Mega Man X would be in my top 10 for sure. Let's see. Sourlat says, I only played the NES and SNES on the Switch Retro Library. Sourlat says, I only played modern Chrono Trigger. And also, Sourlad says, I love Breath of Fire, 100% the first, and got the good ending on the sequel. I would like to play the sequel on stream sometime. It would be a really long playthrough because it's a pretty lengthy game, but I love Breath of Fire 2. It's got such a cool art style, and I really like the story. A lot of it centers around the idea of religion, but it's cool. It's also the first time I was introduced in a video game to, I guess, the concept of anthro or furry characters. It's not why it's at the top of my list, but the character design in that game is really cool too. My favorite version of Breath of Fire 2 is the advanced version because they gave you the ability to permasprint, which is really nice. We'll see. If I can get an advanced emulator working, then I think I have a ROM of that game filed away somewhere. So we'll see. that is on the docket for potentially later this year, depending on how long we burn through some of the other stuff. Because I have a lot to say about Breath of Fire 2. Walter says Nintendo is just so bad at naming things. Well, I don't know whose decision it was to call the next iteration of the NES the Super Nintendo, but the localized versions that we got are all following the Japanese versions somewhat. You have the Famicom, which is the NES in Japan, and then the Super Famicom. So it made sense just to name them similarly. And then for some reason they went with bits for the 64 because it was the bit wars. Everything was about how many bits a game had, and like the AVGN mentioned a long time ago, no one could really define what bits were. They were just something you heard people talking about when it came to the power and processing capability of a game. If it had more bits, it had to be good, which wasn't always the case. That's why the Jaguar was such a failed system. But yeah, the naming conventions are quite interesting. Sour Lad says, my small brain didn't know you could have movement during the fake cutscenes, so I just went grinding to fight the boss. Oh, I see. I know what you're talking about in Breath of Fire 2. I did the same thing. If it's this part at the end, not getting into spoilers that you're talking about, the first time that happened to me, I just turned the game off because I thought it broke. So that's really interesting. It sounds like your experience was kind of similar to mine. You have to put in the chat, Sour Lad, your final party of who you took into the last dungeon. Edward says 64 bits. Wallace says the Power Glove. Yeah, that should be on here. Although I guess technically it's a piece of hardware, even though it had its own game library. I think it's on the hardware one or controllers. Let me see. I'll look. Oh, that's consoles. No. You'd think it would be on the game controller one. Guess not. That's okay. Power Glove was an interesting experiment, but interesting it's not on here. Oh, it says 64 butts. Sourlat says I was talking about the tournament boss. Oh, okay. Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about there too. Breath of Fire 2 was interesting because they didn't really give you any hints on certain things you're supposed to do. So you could play through the game once and completely screw up a bunch of things and not realize that you had a chance to change them until you play through it again or follow a guide. And Sourlat says I was 100% very under level on the final boss of Breath of Fire 2. It's been forever since I played it. The final boss was decently tough. One thing that game suffered from, it's a real convention of older, like 16-bit era RPGs, was it had a ridiculously high encounter rate. You could go one step, hit an enemy spawn, a random enemy spawn, get through the fight, and it had auto battle, so you could get through easy fights easily. But then you take another step, hit another fight. You ran into encounters so much in that game. That was one of my criticisms. It was ridiculous. Alright, let's see. So we got Super Nintendo up here. Next up, this is the Switch. Switch. I'm pretty sure that's what this is. It's the only thing that resembles a Switch. Just doesn't show the Joy-Cons. I think the Switch is a really good system. I think it combines all the aspects of portability with a solid library of games and good backwards compatibility with their library of titles they've been releasing. So I'm going to put the Switch up here on A tier. There's a lot of must-play things on the system, in my opinion, which is pretty noteworthy in general. You can have the debate about whether or not its hardware is really on par with the other consoles, like the PS4 and Xbox One S. And I guess now we have the Xbox One X and the PlayStation 5. So this one falls into a weird generational gap, I think, because it was out at the same time as the PS4 and the other iteration before the Xbox One X, and it's still around now with the PS5 and the latest version of the Xbox. But outside of its hardware and processing ability, it's got some absolutely classic games on it for its run. And Switch is, what, like 5 or 6 years old now? Obvious things to play on there that everyone's talked about are things like Breath of the Wild. Breath of the Wild is a really good game, and I didn't play it till much later because I got a Switch 3 years ago, maybe? Can't remember now, but not when it came out. I got a Switch much later. But the ports of things like Bayo 2, also really good to play. Then way you don't have to suffer through playing it on a Wii U. Obviously, the last iteration of Smash is really good. There's Monster Hunter. I would have bought a Switch for Rise by itself, even if I didn't own one. And I just like the function of portability versus a home console. You could play it docked. I play mine undocked, just on the go a lot more. But it's good. The Switch is a very solid entry in the Nintendo lineup, which they really needed to do because it came after one of the worst current gen system iterations in Nintendo's library, and we'll get to that one down here. Wazzy says he got a Switch for Monster Hunter. I will bet on it. It wasn't the sole reason. If anything, I bought it for Bayonetta 2 initially, and then they released Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate on Switch. So it wasn't the main reason, but I would have got it for that too, because it wasn't released on anything else, and Generations was on 3DS. You want to talk about decisions based around Monster Hunter? We'll get to that later. Sour Lad says Switch beat the Wii in sales and numbers, I think. That's possible. I don't remember how long the Wii's run was. It was a long time, but you really couldn't find them for a really good portion of that run. There were just supply issues. You couldn't get them. And I think it's pretty easy to get Switches now. Iconic says, I must go. I wish you the best with the rest of your stream, Araku. And Iconic says, bye, chat friendos. See you later, Iconic. Thanks for tuning in and hanging out. It's always a pleasure to have you swing through. So I'll catch you later, dude. Anyway, on the topic of, the Switch to me is really good. It's one of my favorite consoles to come out in the last few generations. Next up, we have the DS. The DS, and by extension, the DS Lite and the DSi. This is a really good system. I'm going to put this one up here. I'm going to put it under the Switch. Sour Lad says, any good place to talk about BOF after stream? Hit me up on Discord. You should be able to find me in Wazzy's Discord, since I don't really talk a lot there, but I'm in there. Send me a request. We'll talk after stream. I am definitely down to discuss Breath of Fire. So send me a request, and I'll hit you up. Keep in mind that my knowledge of Breath of Fire ends abruptly at 2. I know a little bit about 3, and I haven't played any of the other ones after that. But yeah. Give me a holler. Sarlad says DS okay, DS Lite best, DSi mid. Watson says DS under Switch unfollowing. I'm having a little bit of trouble placing the DS because I'm trying to think back through the library. I'm trying to think of all the games I played on it and whether or not to me that outweighs what I played on Switch. I own more games on DS, hands down. We're gonna put this one here for now while we talk about it, and then I'll slot it into the actual list because I put it up here on A tier, but it's not the final position. I got to think about this a little bit. Sourlad says I watched playthrough of 3 and 4. The DS lets you play GBA games too. Yes. So the reason why I'm struggling a little bit is because I'm trying to think about everything that's going to go into the rating in addition to just the library. I own a ton of DS games. Tons of them. In fact, let me do something for chat. This will be kind of fun. Give me 1 second. I'm going to go grab my container of cartridges from the DS. I just have it sitting over here in storage nearby. And we're going to go through what I own. And then we're going to make a judgment call on where to put it based on what I see in the library and then what the console overall meant. Because we played a ton of stuff on DS. So let me go on mute. And then I'm going to go grab this container and then we'll go through the cartridges because there's a lot. So 1 sec. All right. Well, what's Wazzy saying in chat? Sarlat says DS had too many games and very few were good or hidden gems. We're gonna potentially dispute that, Sour Lad. This might take a little while, but I think it'll be an interesting conversation. Wazzy says Rakufaktu, he has a slot in the back of his head for GBA games. I wish. Sour Lad says, did you really want to play Hannah Montana or Suit Life for Zach and Cody on the DS? Wazzy says, is to clean out when he gets a headache, in reference to the slot. Wazzy says, Sour Lad, you and me, Denny's parking lot now. Apathetic Potato. Potato's here. What's up, Apathetic Potato? Apathetic Potato says, why Denny's? Wazzy has a pretty good explanation of that. Alright. So what I've done is I have grabbed all my old portable stuff out of storage. And I realized I own 2 DS's. I think the third one I gave to my friend because his shoulder button broke. Where does it say that? I have a DSi, the original DS model I have. I don't know where it went. I think it broke. Original model 3DS with a metal Monster Hunter case. And we'll get to the advanced library because I have a butt ton of advanced games. But what I want to do for the sake of the stream is I'm going to go through the things I owned on DS. And maybe we'll do that for Advance too. There's a lot. But we will make a determination where to put the console based on all of the titles. There are a lot, and I won't organize them because that'll take too long. Potato says there's an American football game going on today that is the biggest one of the year, and I hope one team loses so I can make the potion I've wanted to make for years that requires the tears of a loved one. Sour Lad says we don't know all the DS games. Potato says Pokemon and Ranger games on DS. Edward says GBA head slots aren't far off thanks to our Lord and Savior Elon Musk. Yeah, I believe that. Waz says, what team? The Mets? The Mets are a baseball team from New York, right? I don't follow sports. The reason why I'm doing the stream today is because I don't care about sport ball. The only thing I care about with this year's Super Bowl is that it has a bunch of really interesting things lined up for its halftime show. It's like Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg and Mary J. Blige and a bunch of classic rap artists are performing for the halftime show. So I'm going to need to go track down the highlights from that. Other than that, I do not care one bit about sport ball. Oh boy, we are going to have a field day with all of these DS games. Sweet Jesus. Alright. In no particular order, talking about things on the DS, spanning all iterations of its hardware. DS Base, Lite, and DSi. Mario Kart DS. That's a really good game. I don't really like racing games in general, but we played a ton of Mario Kart DS with my friends and I. Good entry. And its font is tiny. Castlevania, Portrait of Ruin. That's a really good game. All of the handheld Castlevanias were a lot of fun. Solid entry. Tato says sport ball meh. I just want to see the Bengals lose. Starlight says Mega Man Battle Network. I don't think I own one of the Battle Networks, but I did play, I think, the first two. Wazzy says Tales of Abyssport was on DS. Final Fantasy 12, Zodiac Age. Wazzy says I'll fight. I'll Portrait of Ruin your face. All right, we got Planet Puzzle League. I really enjoyed Planet Puzzle League. That's a good game. The one I played the most was Tetris DS by far. Hundreds of hours at least. Played so much Tetris DS. And that's the next one on the list. One of the early titles on DS, Meteos. That was also really fun. I'm surprised they never made any other entries in that series. Really creative look at puzzle games. Competitive. Sour Lad says, unfortunately the DSi had a virtual store, so who knows how many virtual exclusives died. Yeah, that's true. There were a bunch of basically software releases that were only put onto the DSi store. If Nintendo really wanted to make some money, they would go back and resurrect a lot of that stuff and put it on Switch, because I'd buy it. Let's see. Rune Factory. The first Rune Factory. Boy, I haven't thought about that game in a while. There's a new one coming out. Is it 5? Dragon Quest Monsters, one of my favorite series that is pretty much dead now, and that makes me sad. Pokemon Diamond. I own a Pokemon game. I think Diamond on DS, Sapphire on Advance. We'll get to the Advance ones later. Bleach DS. I've talked about this game before. Bleach DS was a fighting game. The first and second one were very, very good 2D fighting games. Very, very good. We played a ton of Bleach DS, my friends and I. Ooh, Advance Wars. Which one is this? Advance Wars Dual Strike. Ah, that was a pretty good one. I'm very excited for the Reboot Camp Switch thing that's coming out for Advance Wars in April, I believe it is. Devil Survivor, SMT spinoff. Like a strategy, Disgaea-esque take on Shin Megami Tensei games. Very, very good. Devil Survivor 2, the sequel, also really good. Puzzle Quest. Does anybody here remember Puzzle Quest on the DS? That game was absolutely huge. And I remember it was very difficult to find for a while. Very fun RPG that took kind of like a, it was like a, almost like a Bejeweled Match 3 type gameplay. And made a whole RPG around it. Puzzle Quest was awesome. I really liked that series. The sequel was a little bit meh. Etrian Odyssey 2. That was my entry into... This is Atlas, right? Yep. To Atlas's brutal first-person dungeon crawler RPG game. That was the one where you had to draw your own maps on the other screen of the DS. I started with the second one. I didn't play the first Etrian Odyssey, but they're very good. Etrian Odyssey 3 and 4. I think I'd only beat the second one. Fossil Fighters, aka the not Pokemon game, which is actually a storied franchise that I only played one in. It was pretty fun. You have dinosaurs instead of Pokemon. Wazzy says, that's the one that was like Persona Q. Yes, Persona Q's infrastructure was built off of the Etrian Odyssey series. I never did play Q. I have the collector's edition, but I never opened it. But I heard Q was really fun. Sour Lad says, I thought Persona Q was 3DS. It was, but it was using a lot of the mechanics from Etrian Odyssey. That was where they took the sort of gameplay from. Next up, Suikoden Tierkris. I've only played one Suikoden game in my entire life, and it was this one. And I think I got 3/4 of the way through it. It was fun. It's a good JRPG. It had a million characters that you could unlock. Lufia, Curse of the Sinistrals. This is a reboot of Lufia 2 on Super Nintendo, which is one of my favorite games. The DS version was a little janky, but still good. I really liked it. It took a new spin on the story. It was quite fun. All right, let's see. Still going through DS titles. Contra 4. Contra 4 was on DS. That game was really fun. That game was very difficult, but it was quite good. That was the one that you had like a claw thing that you could use to grapple between screens and jump between the top screen and bottom screen. Very good game, but brutally difficult. And maybe they'll... Well, they're still making iterations on Contra, I guess, but that's the last big one I remember playing. A Radiant Historia. Radiant Historia is another RPG that's from Atlas. I didn't beat that one, but it's a really neat game. It involves time travel a la Chrono Trigger. It's got a really neat sort of cast and presentation. I need to go back and play through that. Kind of an underrated title in 3DS. Next up, we got a big one. The World Ends With You. A Square Enix property. The World Ends With You is one of my favorite games of the portable era. I think I've talked about it a little bit on other streams. I forgot what we were ranking, but The World Ends With You is incredibly cool. I do need to check out I think it was a remaster report on Switch they released, because I wanted to see what they did to it. But it hadn't been ported to, I think, iPhone, the mobile store. Wazzy says, I've always wanted to play World Ends With You. I think you would like it. it's such an interesting presentation for an RPG, and it's very stylish. It's I believe it's Nomura, the Kingdom Hearts dude, who designed the characters, but it's very unique, and it was a unique experience on DS back in the day. Wazzy says there's also World Ends With You 2. Did they do a sequel? I know the port that they released had some new stuff, but let's see. I don't think there was a sequel. Unless they're working on one and it hasn't come out, because I don't see anything here for a sequel. The version that's been ported, I think, is an enhanced one. Oh, Neo, The World Ends With You. What's that? That's what it was. But it's called Neo, The World Ends With You. I didn't even hear about that. When was it released? Second game in the series. Released on July 21st for PlayStation 4 and Switch. Oh, it was released on last September for PC, but on the Epic Store. Boo. Interesting. I wonder if that game's any good. It's got kind of mixed reviews from what I've seen. People are saying it wasn't as good as the first one. Because the first one was the one that was ported to Switch first before that came out. For Wazzy, I would recommend giving it a try. It's a really cool game. Wazzy says, it is Nomura. Did you not see the belts? Yep. All right. A few more cartridges in the library. Final Fantasy IV, which I never did beat. I got close to the end. That's a port of the old Super Nintendo game. Very good. They made it 3D from what I remember. Dragon Quest Monsters 2 Joker. Also really good entry in the series. I played probably 200 hours in that game. Shin Megami Tensei Strange Journey. Also really good. Let's see. A couple more. Advance Wars Day of Ruin. That one was pretty good. I don't think I played that one quite as much as Dual Strike, but it was fine. Chrono Trigger DS. I forgot there was a Chrono Trigger version. That one was pretty good too. They actually added some content to that game that wasn't in the original. I'll leave it in the case here. And then Bleach DS Second, the second fighting game. That one was the better experience. I think it was called Bleach DS, like Dark Souls or something. What was it called here in the West? The version I have is an import. Because the DS was region free, it was really easy to import things. And we liked the first one so much, we imported the second one and played the whole thing in Japanese. Oh yeah, the second one was called Bleach DS, Bleach Dark Souls. That's really bad branding considering Dark Souls was out at the time. Yeah, really awesome fighting game. Sour Lad says Chrono Trigger DS had the monster battle thing and bonus content. Yeah, it had the extra dungeons that sort of tied the ending together with Chrono Cross, from what I remember, which is interesting. So that is all of the things I have on DS. How many cartridges is that? 28? I think that's 28 titles in the library, just in cartridge form. So yeah, I had a lot of things on the DS. I don't think I'm missing any. But yeah, really solid library. So yeah, I'm putting the DS up here on A tier. I think it justifiably goes higher than the Switch. There's so many good games on here. They're kind of hard to compare because they're different types of consoles, but yeah. I hope Nintendo finds a way to take some of that library that was on the DS and port it over to something like a Switch Virtual Console or something else, because I would absolutely pick up some of these old games and play them again. And I do every once in a while. I'll hook my DS up, assuming it'll still hold a charge. So let's see. We will move on to 3DS. Where are my 3DS games? Those are elsewhere. And I believe 3DS could play regular DS model games too. I think the cartridges are the same size. While we're talking, I'm just putting all these things back in their cases. What I have are a bunch of old Game Boy, original model Game Boy cartridge holders. They look like little plastic cases that are the same size, the square carts for the Game Boy. So I use that to hold all my DS cartridges because I have too many of them. Sour Lad says, new boss plus the new ending and the side mission you could do. Yeah. It was neat seeing the additional content in Chrono Trigger. Where will we rank the 3DS? 3DS, also really good library. I have a ton of stuff on that. I just don't know where all my games are at the moment. I just realized some of my cartridges are mixed in here. Etrian Odyssey 4 is a 3DS game. So let's see. Is that the only one? There may be a mix of things in here now that I'm looking at it, but that's okay. For the sake of discussion on the regular DS library, it doesn't change the fact that the games are rated very highly. But I'm going to put the 3DS up here. I'm going to put it after the Switch. It was a good system. There were lots of good things on the 3DS that I played. And the fact that it, from what I remember, could play the older games is also good. Sour Lad said, the problem would be the touch controls. Yeah, that's probably why they haven't just done a direct port of the old DS library. It's because of the touch controls. It's a shame. But I'm sure Nintendo can figure it out. If they just realize how much money they'd make, I'm sure they could do it. But of note, the reason why I would put the 3DS up here so high is because I think the most games I owned were actually downloaded titles. I just mean I don't own physical carts, which is probably why I don't have a storage thing of them anywhere. The majority of things on the system, which I was just looking at the other day, but majority of things on the system were software titles and things I just didn't buy physical media for. But nothing else. Monster Hunter. I know Wazzy's going to laugh at me, but Monster Hunter puts that system very high up because I owned 3 Monster Hunter titles on the 3DS. And that equates to a lot of hours. A lot of hours. 3 Ultimate, 4 Ultimate, and Generations. And Stories, actually. First Stories I had on 3DS, too. Sour Lad says, the 3DS had too many models. Yeah, they had the base version, the brick, which I had way back. They had the 3DS, what do they call it? The lighter version, which is the one I was just looking at. Let's see, does it have a name? I cannot tell with the case on it. Let me pull it off. I have this painted solid metal case for Monster Hunter on my old 3DS. It was the version that came after the brick. I know that. Let's see if I can pull this off. XL. That's right. The 3DS XL lived up to its name. This thing can be used as a bulletproof shield. And then there was the new 3DS, the one that had the little knob, or it's like a C-stick thing in the upper corner, so that you didn't have to get the peripheral for another analog stick, which was nice. But yeah, good system. There were good games on there. Alright, Xbox One. I am putting Xbox One on C tier. I'll be the first C tier entry. If we consider the Xbox One, and then where is there's only one version of this on here. There were too many iterations of the Xbox consoles. It's so frustrating to try and tell them apart. I could talk about that for hours. But I own one of these. I bought it for Killer Instinct, and I think the only games I bought were Killer Instinct and Final Fantasy 15. And I never even beat 15. But to me, it was a fine console. There just wasn't a whole lot that really drew people to it compared to the PlayStation. Because it was Xbox One and PlayStation 4, right? Where's PlayStation 4? Down here? I think the PlayStation won that. You had things like Halo and I think Gears and other things, but to me, I think the PlayStation won that particular generation of the consoles. And likewise, for the previous iteration, which was 360 and PS3, I would argue that the 360 won that one. Both systems had good stuff, but I think the 360 had more of a draw. But yeah, I don't really play much on my Xbox One. Once they ported Killer Instinct elsewhere, then it was pretty much useless, but I won't get rid of it. It's just sitting in my shelf. Sourlad says 2DS was a flop. Was it? I know people bought 2DSs because they didn't want to bother with the screens. So if they didn't bother investing in 3DS and still wanted to play the library, I know some people who bought those. I didn't because I didn't see a need to. But just one of those additional things Nintendo made. I don't know how much money they made off of it, but it kind of is what it is. All right, next up, PS4. PS4. This one's a little tricky too. I'm going to put this one at the top of B tier. PS4 is a good system. It's very good. I just don't own a lot for it. It had some really classic games, and what's going to put it up high on the list for me are some of the exclusive things for it. Big standout titles I bought on PS4 would be Bloodborne. I bought this for Monster Hunter World initially, because when it was coming out, but the first thing I ever played on PS4 years after it came out was Bloodborne. And Bloodborne's one of my favorite games in the top 10 for me, for sure. I also bought Mortal Kombat 11. That's on here. But PlayStation 4 is good system. I think it definitely beat out against the Xbox One to me. Well, this says Persona 4. Persona 4 on what? Persona 4 wasn't released on PS4, was it? Was the Golden Port on PS4 and PC? Maybe someone can fact check that. That would be worth picking up. If you can play Persona 4 Golden on PS4 and you haven't played the original, definitely pick it up there. While it says P4 was on PS3 and 4. Okay, all right, I gotcha. Yeah, play those games. Golden is on Vita. Golden was ported to PC, right? Pretty sure it was on Steam. I wanted to play it on stream, but Atlas is really unusually finicky about people playing and streaming their games. I don't know why, so I didn't bother. Sourlad says the OG 2DS was unfoldable bread slice, and the 2DS XL, that would just be a 3DS. Not sure what the difference was. Yeah, if you didn't care about having the foldable model, that was essentially what it was. It's very, very strange. It was like that portable only version of the Switch they made. It had to have a market, but I can't see them making a ton of money off of it. Next up, we've got the 360. 360, I am putting on A tier. Slim and the 360 are occupying the same spot. They're not in any particular order. It's actually, I'm going to put this in not played because I only have a base model 360 up here. I think. Do I have a Slim? I think mine's black. Huh. I'd go look, but I don't feel like it. We'll do this just so I played a lot on a 360. I think that was my roommate's, and mine might be a Slim because I bought it later. I don't remember. It's fine. But the 360 had a really good library of games, and I played a lot of stuff on it. A good portion of the titles were also on PS3, which I didn't own at the time, but really good stuff on 360. We played, I think it was Samurai Warriors 2. It was one that had the kind of Monopoly-esque board game. We played so many hours of that in multiplayer. The original Bayonetta, we played on 360. Original iteration of Dark Souls in its terrible performance glory, I played on 360. There's tons of really good games. This is a good system. And the Xbox Live Arcade titles were really good as well. Lots of good stuff. The original Xbox, I never owned. I did play a couple things on it, but not a lot. For some people, this was their first later generation system. And this was the one that had the Duke, that gigantic controller with the circular shape before they made the, was it S-type controller? Xbox original. You can't call it the Xbox One because that's this one because Microsoft sucks at naming things. I'm going to put it up here on C tier. There were some good things that started on that system that would become important later. But to me, it's not a super memorable system. Important, but I wouldn't rank it very high. The first Halo would have been on this, right? We played Halo 2 on 360. Yeah, it is interesting. Interesting to see where Microsoft started with its game console. Next up, we've got the Atari 2600. I have played a decent amount of Atari. I never owned one. We're going to put it up here on B tier. It's worth noting that the old school Atari is really important when it comes to gaming history, even if you're not old enough to have played it. A lot of the games on that system are much more simple, obviously, even compared to the NES. But even though they're simplistic, they're really fun. And it's interesting going back to play some of those old ones and just seeing how the technology evolved. So yeah, I couldn't justify putting the Atari much lower than that. Even though it's not a high console on my list, it's undeniably important. Next up, we've got the Wii. The console that changed the landscape of gaming in the 2000s, right? Late 2000s is when the Wii came out. You could not find one of these on a shelf to save your life. It was the hot ticket. While it says wee woo, wee woo. Funny naming conventions aside, and speaking to the point of Nintendo giving their systems weird titles. The Wii is a good system. Quite good, in fact. I would put the Wii up here. Can I justify putting it below PS4? Truth be told, I didn't own a ton of games on the Wii. I had some of the essentials, but I probably own less than 10 games for it. But I think I spent more hours on the Wii playing things like Smash. This was Brawl? Which Smash title came out on the Wii? Yeah, Brawl. Okay. I couldn't remember if there was a different version that came out on the Wii U, but yeah, there were good titles on the Wii. Sarlad says games plus motion controls. Sarlad says, I mean, the Wii was always available in my area, so not sure why, if you guys say it was rare. It wasn't rare for a long time, but for a good portion of the early part of its run, the Wii was, you couldn't find them. You just couldn't get them on shelves. People were waiting in line for hours just to get one. I got one a little bit later, and it wasn't that difficult, but in the beginning, around that first holiday season when it came out, people were just trampling each other to get one, and you saw scalpers selling it for thousands of dollars on things like eBay. It was bananas. But between its integration of motion controls with the goofy things like the Wiimotes, which resulted in fun games, I think everybody played Wii Sports at least once. I think the Wii is pretty significant. It was a really solid entry in Nintendo's library, following after the GameCube in order. And then following after it would be something that would be a bit of a step down. We'll get to you last, I guess. Sorry, that says Wii Sport Resort. I've only played the original Wii Sports. I haven't played Resort. Yeah, those were fun games. And there was a decent amount of virtual console stuff that was new for a Nintendo system at the time. So you could go back and play some of the old games that were out on things like the GameCube. I think the first version of Ikaruga I played was on Wii. I think I borrowed one for the GameCube. Or maybe it was the GameCube version I played on the Wii, because it had backwards compatibility, I believe, with GameCube games. Sorry, that says the Galaxy games. Yeah, really, really solid lineup of titles on the Wii. Very good. Okay, moving on. We've got the Game Gear. Okay, sorry, that says some Wii had the GameCube compatibility. Pretty sure mine did, because I remember putting those little tiny CDs or DVDs the GameCube had into my Wii U. I think RE4 was one game I played. Ikaruga. I think I bought a version of Killer 7 on the Wii or GameCube. I might have ordered one and then played it on the Wii. But yeah, I wish all of them had backwards compatibility like that. Wazzy says that's a T85 calculator. Which one? Are you talking about this one? The Game Gear? Sega's first foray, I can't talk, into handhelds that I know of, at least that we saw in the West, was the Game Gear. Oh, the Game Gear is D tier. It is a really interesting idea, just not executed too well compared to the Game Boy. The Game Gear was 16-bit, I think, and the Game Boy might have been 4 or 8. The problem with the Game Gear is, unless you really liked Sonic and some first-party stuff on the Sega libraries, there wasn't a lot. I owned 2 games for the Game Gear back in the day, Sonic 2 and Ren and Stimpy. And Sonic 2 was good, Ren and Stimpy was okay, but it was not going to compete with the library of stuff on Game Boy. And I don't even think it lasted long enough for Pokemon to come out. But the Game Gear had a color screen, so it had full color and better graphics and power, but it just didn't have the library. And also, it was incredibly inefficient. It took four to six AA batteries, and they would last about an hour at most. So let's say you're going on a road trip with the family, and you wanted to take your Game Gear. If you didn't take 3 dozen batteries, you weren't going to be playing it for more than like an hour. It was incredibly inefficient. Hooked up to the AC adapter was fine because you could just play it, but completely portable, it would drain batteries like nobody's business. It was nuts. So it's a shame. They could have done a lot with it. It was also a little bit bulky. It was much larger than the Game Boy and horizontal instead of vertical. So the idea of portability just wasn't there, and it wasn't efficient. Sourlad says, wait, was there any of those Sega console attachments on the list? No, that's what I was looking at earlier. There's no 32X. There's no Sega CD. Those would probably collectively be lumped in like high D tier maybe. The 32X was a neat idea, an attachment that could play its own library of games that were higher bits than the base. It was the Genesis, right? The way everything's sort of attached together. Sega's idea of daisy chaining devices to the base hardware was very unusual. I'm not quite sure why they did that, but it's just an interesting concept that not really anybody else has done as far as I can tell. Sarlat says the Nintendo CDI would be F, right? CDI wasn't Nintendo. CDI was Philips, I believe. Yeah, Philips CDI. Philips, who is known for making TVs. They were an electronics company that tried to get into disc-based game consoles, and they made the CDI. It looks like a big DVD player. That one would be an F. Well, no, I'd put that one in D. I don't think there's any F-tier consoles, honestly. Looking at the list. I put that there just in case we had some garbage, but of the things I've played, I guess N-Gage, if I played it, that'd be F-tier. That's a pretty bad one. There was a Atari Lynx, too. I don't see that on the list. That was also really bad. That'd be on F tier. But yeah, CDI was Philips. That's not on here as far as I could tell. I don't see it. And then there was another one I'm thinking of. They were old consoles. I know the AVGN's covered. But yeah, CDI is garbage. The only thing keeping it out of F tier are those hilarious memes that came from the CDI Zelda games. If there wasn't something entertainingly bad about the titles on there, yeah, it would absolutely be at the bottom. Walsey says Wii U is F tier. Wii U's not F tier. That would mean it had nothing good on it, and it was a bad product. It was a failed product, but it wasn't a bad product. We'll get to the Wii U. It's last on the list. But before that, we need to talk about more Sony consoles. This is the Vita. PS Vita is such an odd duck when it comes to the handheld library. I'm going to put Vita on low B tier. And I've got kind of an argument for this one, so hear me out. I think the Vita is a really good system. It's got good hardware, and it's got a pretty decent library of games. The problem is, it did not have the development support it needed. If more people had chosen to develop for the Vita instead of the 3DS, or both, I think the Vita would still be alive later in its lifespan. Maybe not now, but it's a shame because there's good stuff on it, just not enough to outpace what was on the 3DS up here. I bought a Vita specifically for Persona 4 Golden. I think I've talked about that before. Having missed Vita, the Persona 4 PS2 version, when they announced that the golden upgraded port was coming out on Vita, I said, even if I play nothing else, I'm going to pick it up on Vita. And it turns out the Vita hardware is really good, and it could play PSP games. So I could port my saves from the PSP library and just download the games digitally, and I could play all my PSP stuff on there, which is really important. It's just a shame that more stuff wasn't on it, because it was very solid. Dragon's Crown. I played so much Dragon's Crown on Vita. Disgaea 2 and 3 I played on Vita. Dissidia. We're probably not going to get to the fighting games tier list today. That was the other one I wanted to do, but if we do that, it'll be a 4-hour stream. But Dissidia 1 and 2. Played Dissidia 1. I guess 1 and 2 were on PSP first, I think. But I played both those a ton on Vita, too. Wazzy says, Vita is good. That we'll agree on. You get one cool guy point, but that's it. Like P3P and Crisis Core. P3P was a PSP game first, I believe. I did play it on Vita, but it was on PSP first. Never played Crisis Core, but also heard good things about that one, too. But yeah, good library, good hardware, just not a heavy push by Sony. I don't think they knew what they were doing with the Vita. And because the PSP probably didn't hit as hard in the library competitively as the Nintendo products, yeah, I don't think they bothered. It's a shame. Wazzy says, P3P was on PSP, but it's on my Vita. I bought it on PSP, but I finished it on Vita, I think. But I like that you could play games on both. You could jump between the iterations of the console. But yeah, good system, just didn't really get its fair shot, in my opinion. And the Vita, was it Go? The version they released later that had, I think, 2 screens or something. By then, it's like, I have one. I don't need another one. Next up, we have another console that I think didn't get its fair shake. Sega Dreamcast. Dreamcast is going to go on B tier. I'm going to put it above the 2600. This one's tricky. I didn't own a Dreamcast, but I had some friends who did. And the stuff that I played on Dreamcast was really fun. It was a really good system. It had a funky controller. The controller was kind of weird. But it also didn't really get its fair shake. Sega pulled the plug on it when I think they were noticing that it wasn't doing as well as some of the other consoles. Like, I think Dreamcast was a direct competitor to Gamecube, I think. Dreamcast, Gamecube, PS2, Xbox original, I believe, were the competitors at the time. There may be some overlap with the generations, but there was good stuff on there. I remember the first version of Ikaruga I played on Dreamcast. It had one of the most defining fighting game iterations, Soul Calibur 1, which was really good. It had Rival Schools, which I'm pretty sure was maybe not exclusive, but I played Rival Schools on Dreamcast, I believe. Sour Lad says it had Sonic Adventure and Heroes, right? I think so. I didn't play any Sonic games on Dreamcast, but I know it had its own set that were really popular. But yeah, just a weird oddity of a console that didn't really get its chance to shine. Oh, is this the Atari Lynx? Again, it's tough because these screenshots don't have captions on them. Nope, that is not a Lynx. Lynx looks a little bit longer and has a different shape. I have no idea what this is off the top of my head. All right. Home stretch. Now we have the Xbox One X. This is the current iteration of Microsoft's consoles. I have heard good things about how it performs. I'm going to put it up here at the top of C tier just because I have no intention of ever picking up one of these. I've yet to see anything announced for it I care about that's not on another system. Like, I would get a PS5 before I got... Actually, I'm going to put it 1X on haven't played. That's more fair. But if I'm putting just in preference, it would be kind of mid. Sourlet says, oh, the mini fridge? Yeah, this weird upright obelisk look for it is very bizarre. It's distinct. It's definitely something you notice, and it's kind of noteworthy, but yeah. Wazzy says, then why is it on the list? You mean the ranking? That's why I moved it down here and haven't played. PS5 and Xbox One X I haven't touched. If I have no experience with the library, I can't really rate it. But yeah, I don't know. I would get a PS5 first. Even that's not super high on my list. It'd be nice to have, but unless something comes out on here that's not on PC, then I'm not super pressed to get one. Okay. Moving right along. This one is Neogeo. Neogeo is that kind of other player in the older home console games amongst the Nintendo and Sega systems. It never really found its way into the West as far as getting an audience. Neogeo was really popular in Japan, I know that. And it had good games. It had some really classic fighting games, like things that came out of SNK's library, things like King of the Monsters. It was good, but it never really picked up in the West. So I'm putting Neogeo on C tier. It also made it very difficult to get because it was so expensive. The cartridges for the old Neogeo were these massive bricks looking things because they was ported from arcade systems from what I remember. And one cartridge would cost, I think, over $100. It was nuts. I never had one. I'd played them at other people's houses before, and it had fun games, but you couldn't just go to the store and pick one up. And I think it had much more of an audience in Japan, so eventually they just stopped supporting it and porting things out to other countries. But really faithful ports of the arcade stuff, too, almost 1-to-1. I think that's why the cartridge was so big. It was like arcade boards that they retrofitted into a smaller housing and sold them. Alright, next up, Nintendo 64. Nintendo 64 was also a pretty influential console. I'm putting it down at the bottom of B tier because of its library and impact. Not based on the controller, mind you. The controller is kind of garbage. I don't like the Nintendo 64 controller. But this was Nintendo's first foray into the next generation of gaming following the Super Nintendo and competing with the PlayStation down here. And that involved going 3D, which was definitely a work in progress for a lot of Nintendo titles. But there's good stuff on there. Obviously Smash, Star Fox 64, GoldenEye and Perfect Dark. Two old school shooters I actually like. It Conquers Bad Fur Day. There was Killer Instinct Gold, which was pretty decent. Some Mortal Kombat games. Lots of good stuff on the 64. I'd say it earns its spot here, even though the tech was still evolving. Sour Lad says the beginning of 3D games. And even though it was rough, like a good example would be the Castlevania 64 games. Those were not good. They were a good experiment, but not executed super well. But no one can doubt the significance of games on 64. It's important in gaming history for Nintendo. So yeah, it's going up here on B tier. Good system. Next up, we got the Game Boy Advance. I owned a first generation Advance fairly soon after it came out. I saved up money to buy this one, but the only ones they had in stock at the store, the import store on Homeworld that I went to, was the pink transparent fuchsia one, not the base purple. So that's what I have. I don't know where it is. I think it's off in storage somewhere. But I played a ton of games on Advance. And as we sort of wind down the tier list here, I did want to go through the games that I had on Advance like we did for the DS. I don't think there's as many of them, but it's worth looking at because the library on Advance is also very good. I'm putting it up here under the DS. Sourlad says, beginning of 3D games, it was very rough. Wazzy can agree. Wazzy says, I refuse to agree. You're not my boss. Yeah, she's only saying that because she knows I'm going to put the PlayStation down on D tier. But let's look at some advanced cartridges real quick. Golden Sun. Golden Sun is a really good RPG franchise that I don't know where it went. There was a second one I didn't play. I think it was like the Lost Ages or something. I think they should bring back Golden Sun on Switch. It was a really cool RPG. Metroid Zero Mission. I think I talked about this one with Matt. Metroid Zero Mission is awesome. It's one of my favorite handheld Zelda game or Metroid games. A reboot of the original NES Metroid in more modern 2D. Very good game. Metroid Fusion. Also really good. I like Zero Mission more, but Fusion is good. Interesting leap forward in the series as far as the story and lore. Here's Mega Man Battle Network 2. I think was it Sour that was referencing this one earlier? I like this game. It was a very unique take on like a turn-based strategy game using Mega Man characters in like the different universe. Good game. That one was a lot of fun. Breath of Fire 2, one of my favorite games on the Advance. We talked about that one. Solid Entry. I think I was still grinding the last dungeon for fighting the final boss. I wanted to make a party of level 99 characters, so I never actually beat the Advance one. Lufia and the Ruins of Lore. The last Lufia game ever made, I think, besides from the reboot on DS later. That was also really good. Standard 2D turn-based JRPG. Wazzy says, you know what makes me mad? Raku is technically my friend, but he gets along with Matt better? Rude. That is a baseless claim. I have a lot in common with Matt, but I wouldn't say I get along with him better or worse than Wazzy. It's just a different type of conversation. So don't get it twisted. Sourlad says Mega Man Battle Network 1 through 5 on the GBA, 6 was on DS, and 5 was remade on DS. Boy, they made a lot of those. Because didn't they have Star Force or whatever? That was one of the later ones. I've played 2, and it was really good. While this is boo Mega Man. Hey, don't boo Mega Man. Wazzy says you have garbage opinions like Matt. Hey, I'm not the one who's hating on Pickles. You lost that poll, so you have no right to talk about garbage opinions. Oh, Sourlad says Star Force is a spin-off and had 3 games on DS. I see. I dropped out of the franchise at that point. Alright. Next cartridge. This one's actually pretty noteworthy too. I've talked about it before, but my first SMT game I ever played, technically, was Demi-Kids on Advance. Set up kind of like a kids Pokemon type game, but with SMT lore and mechanics. It was really cool. Definitely not as dark and heavy as some of the later ones, but still very much an SMT game. Tales of Fantasia. This is a port of the original Super Nintendo one remade on Advance. I never beat it, but I remember enjoying it. Tales of Fantasia is a cool game, and it's got really good music. Well, this says I only lost because y'all cheated. Well, are we going to have to go and audit the voting machines? It's too bad you can't leave polls open indefinitely. Sarah says, also both Battle Network and Star Force did the Pokemon version thing like Red Blue. I remember that because I remember seeing box art for those games and they had different characters on them. And so I remember thinking, you know, if I wanted to play them, I'd have to buy both versions. But yeah, I could see that. Next up in the Advanced Library, Monster Rancher Advance 2. I love Monster Rancher. It's one of my favorite series of all time. I've been playing a lot of Monster Rancher 2 DX on Switch lately. And the portable one was really good. I think Monster Rancher DS or 3DS, that one is filed away somewhere. I gotta figure out where my 3DS games went. Next up, Pokemon Sapphire on Advance. Good game. That's Gen 4? I can never remember the gens. But that one was good. Oh, I did play the first Mega Man Battle Network. This thing in my container is not in any particular order. So I pulled 2 first, but yeah. Battle Network 1's in here. I did play the first one. And none of them after that, I guess. Walsey says, are you telling me you were transported to a faraway land, to a world where monsters rule? Yep, that is true. I was on a quest to tame them all and save the world from the evil Moo. I don't remember how the words of the song go, but yeah, I remember watching the Monster Rancher anime. It was silly, but it was good. Alright, Castlevania. Oh, there's Aria of Sorrow. I don't have Dawn. That's what it was. Aria of Sorrow. Good Castlevania game. Dawn was also pretty decent. I remember playing a version I borrowed from a friend of mine. Castlevania Circle of the Moon. The first. This is a launch title in Advance. It was very good, very difficult. Side-scrolling Castlevania game. And that was back when the first iterations of the Advance hardware had no backlight. So if you wanted to play Advance games and see what you were doing, you had to play it in your bathroom where light was good. Final Fantasy VI on Advance. That's a really good version of Final Fantasy VI. That had added content, kind of like what they did with Chrono Trigger later. I hope they don't remake Final Fantasy VI. It's almost perfect the way it is. I don't think you could do that game better. Sour Lad says, I didn't save and lost 5 hours of gameplay on Battle Network 1. Ugh, ouch. I don't know which one I played more. Maybe the second one, but Battle Network was such an interesting experiment since none of the other Mega Man games were like that. Worthwhile. I don't know if Capcom's ever going to bring that franchise back, but they were good games. And last from the Advanced Library, Zone of the Enders, Fist of Mars. I really like this game. It's one of the top 5 for me of the Advanced Library. I want to play this on stream sometime. If I can get that emulator working for Breath of Fire 2, if that goes well, then I'm going to play Fist of Mars next. It is a very unique strategy game. It's a strategy RPG in the Zone of Enders universe, and the only one I've played. I haven't played Second Runner or any of the old Zone of the Enders games. But Fist of Mars is set up kind of like Advance Wars, where you have a grid and you have units on a team that move around, but instead of it being like a create your own unit thing, you have a series of characters, and they're all in different mechs. It's kind of like Front Mission, actually, which I haven't played, but you navigate around, and when you go to fight things, you have like a heads-up display with the enemy mech kind of flying around. It's unique, but it's really fun, And the main character is knockoff Shinji from Evangelion. Fist of Mars is really cool. I want to show you guys that game at some point. It'd be a fun time. And that does it for all my advanced games. That's 1, 2, 3, 15? 15 carts? I thought I had more than that, but still a decent amount. The Advance is a really good system. There was a lot of titles and unique games in that library that are worth playing, which is why I went on Amazon, it was many years ago, and paid probably more than I should have for a brand new DS Lite, because it had the advanced game slot, and I want to be able to play the games on it. Oh, I missed one more. I guess I have 16. Altered Beast, Garden of the Realms, a later port of, or not port, it was a later game in the series of the Altered Beast franchise from way back in Sega's era. So it was a side-scrolling beat 'em up. Garden of the Realms was fun. A little jank, but really good. Sour Lad says, if you ever want to play Battle Network 5, you should get the DS remake because it combines both versions and has changes from the original. Well, that's good to know. I think they should just do a remastered collection and release that on Switch. I think they'd have to figure out the screen thing, but I would definitely consider picking them up just to see where the story went in those later games. Alright, let me put all this stuff back in the box. So many pieces of hardware. I have given Nintendo a lot of money, but all this stuff holds up pretty well. So let's look at the next entry on the list. PSP. Again, home stretch. PSP is going to go... I'm going to put this one on B tier under PS Vita. Actually, no. It's going to go higher. I think the PSP had a better lifespan than the Vita did. Even though the Vita is the better hardware, PSP had no right to exist in competition with Nintendo and do as well as it did, but they did it. They found a way to make a compelling library and have decent enough hardware performance that the game didn't just get outright buried by Nintendo. And that's something you gotta respect from Sony. Sour Lad says, it's sad because they didn't do anything for anniversary of Battle Network other than add some characters to the gacha game. I see. Wazzy says, PSP over Vita? Fool. I'm not talking purely based on the hardware, though, and the actual performance of the games. If it was purely based on that, the Vita would be higher. But the PSP had a better lifespan as far as games that came out and its performance as a product. Because the Vita's total lifespan of development was short. I think it was only a few years. PSP was around for a long time. Wazzy says it wasn't as durable for a portable console. Yeah, hardware-wise, it wasn't. It didn't stack up to the Vita because it wasn't designed as well. But when I think about all the games that came out on it and its overall performance compared to the Vitas, I think just from an impact perspective, the PSP was better performer. I prefer the Vita personally, if I had a choice, but the PSP, I think, did better in its lifespan. And again, neither of those consoles had any right to succeed at all, but they did. Wazzy says, I had two Vitas, both broke because they were poorly made. That's interesting. I have a Generation 1 Vita, and I played a lot of hours on it, and it's fine. I don't know. I think it was first generation. No, maybe second generation. I think I'm wrong, because I didn't buy a Vita right away. Wazzy says, you do have a choice. You're legit ranking them right now. Yeah, I'm choosing to put the PSP higher because I think it had a better product lifespan than the Vita, even though I like the Vita as a console better. It's not purely based on personal preference for this ranking. Sarlat says consume liquid and stretch bones. Yes, we will drink some water. Wazzy said, or Sarlat says, make your own tier list. Yeah, I could put this one in. I can link this in chat. Oh, let me put this over here. Let me see if I can just drop this directly in chat and not have it. I don't want it to pre-fill. So let me see if this works. You guys can tell me if the link works. Here's the link to the tier list. It should work. Walsey says you're ranking them though. You decide what they're ranked on. Yeah, and I said it's based on the impact of the console and its library and my personal experience. It's a little bit of everything. It's not purely based on success. It's not purely based on personal preference. It's a mix. If it was based on personal preference, this would be a different order. But I'm sticking by my ranking. PSP, I'm ranking higher than Vita overall, even though I like the Vita more. Personal preference, yeah, it'd be higher. But it's not just based on personal preference. Wazzy says she's losing her mind. I want to see her tier list for this. Let's move on, though. We got to get through this. PlayStation 1. PlayStation 1. I gotta be a little bit careful how I rank this one, because my personal experience with this one is interesting. I'm gonna put PS1 on. I would rank it higher. Let's try and rationalize here. I would rank it higher than Dreamcast. I'm gonna put PlayStation 1 below the Wii. And I'm gonna have to talk through my thought process on this one a little bit. I never owned this console, but I've played a lot of stuff that came from it, and I've played a lot on it. PlayStation 1 is a really good console, but it falls into a similar trap like the Nintendo 64 in that it's a transition console into a next gen of tech. But to me, as far as an overall product, it didn't change the landscape of gaming quite to the extent the Wii did. Which is why I'm putting it below the Wii. Wazzy says he's purposely doing this. If I really wanted to piss off Wazzy, I would put the PlayStation down on like F tier or something, but that's not right. There are really good things that are undeniably must-play titles on PlayStation 1. No one's going to deny that. They're not games I personally played. Like, I didn't play FF8, 7 and 8 and 9 because 7, 8, and 9 were all on PlayStation, right? I didn't play those games, but I acknowledge that they're really popular and that people should play them. One of my favorite games in probably my top 20 is Castlevania Symphony of the Night. That's a PlayStation game. Wild Arms was also a really good RPG. That came from PlayStation. Wazzy said he's doing this purposely to spite me. That's not true. Sarlad says his gamer knowledge is limited. I don't know everything, but I will explain my decisions. Wazzy says no, 8 was garbage. No one should play 8. I have no opinion on 8. I never played 8. Final Fantasy 8. People like it. I don't care. Just like Final Fantasy 7. I've never played 7. People love it. That's good for them. Or 9. In fact, I haven't played any Final Fantasies up till between 6 and 10. And I didn't even like 10 that much. But there's just a good selection of games on PlayStation that were really important. The first Armored Core game, a series I love to death, I played on PS1 way after it came out, and that was really good. a Square, I think it's Square Enix side-scrolling shooter called Einhander is one of my favorite shooters, and that was on PlayStation. Wazzy says, who's surprised Raku doesn't have an opinion on something? I can't have an opinion on something I didn't play. If you're talking about Final Fantasy 7, 8, and 9, again, I know they're good games that people like, but I can't comment on them if I haven't played them. I'm not going to say 8 is garbage when I haven't played it. I just know people are really polarized on 8. 9 people seem to like. 7, everyone talks about as the greatest game ever. I think if I were to compare them, well, I can't compare them, but my favorite's 6. While it says didn't like 10. I've talked about 10 before. 10 was a well-presented game and pretty important for Final Fantasy, but I couldn't stay on board enough to beat it. I got to the very end of the game and stopped because I was so bored. I like the design of the characters and the environment, and the story is okay, but it just didn't motivate me to finish it, and that's not good for my overall experience. Well, it says puts PlayStation behind the Wii. I don't know. I just think the PlayStation didn't cause as much of an impact overall as the Wii did. It was important. PlayStation was a really big step forward in the consoles, but to me, I think the Wii was bigger. There's nothing wrong with being in the high B tier. These are all well above average. But yeah. Walsey said, booking a plane ticket to go punch Raku in the back of the head. Well, that's fine. Again, I encourage everybody to make their own tier lists for their personal experience and their rankings for this, just so I could see the difference in opinions. Feel free to make your own and send them to me on Twitter or Discord. I'd be curious to see, because not everyone has the same experience in gaming. I'm like 20 years older than Wazzy, so my overall ranking based on all of the components is going to be different. 1, because my experience was different, and 2, because, again, I'm ranking these not only on personal preference. Sourlad says the PlayStation was the reason the GameCube flopped, right? Or was it the N64? I don't know how long the GameCube was competing and what it was competing with. I thought it was the PlayStation 2 that buried the GameCube, but I could be wrong. It could have been because PlayStation was a bit earlier. You'd have to look at when they were both out at what time. I don't know. It's a good question. But all right, let's finish out the console ranking here before Wazzy has an aneurysm. Wazzy says, I'm going to put Raku on a tier list, D tier. That's fine. Like I said, I only do these tier ranking streams because I think it's a good discussion. I fully expect to be canceled for my opinions. I wouldn't state my opinions otherwise. All right, let's look at Saturn. Sega Saturn is going on low C tier. I don't know a single person that had one, but I played it a few times. The Sega Saturn was marketed even worse than the Dreamcast from what I remember. And I think it came out before? Saturn was before Dreamcast, I think. Let me check. Don't quote me on that. 95 for Sega Saturn. Yeah, Dreamcast was in the 2000s, wasn't it? Oh no, Dreamcast was first. Dreamcast was released in North America, outside Japan in 99. Hold on. I need to actually look at the article, not just the headline here. Dreamcast was 99 in the West. Saturn was 95. Okay, yeah. Saturn was first. Dreamcast was later. I remember Panzer Dragoon for the Dreamcast. I remember playing that, and it was really cool. Other than that, I can remember nothing from that library. Edward says, Raku tier list. So you're talking about a ranking of every tier list that I've done to date, and then ranking the tier lists in order of how good they were? How many have I done? I can look at that. I bookmark everything that I rank just so I have a running list of all the things I've done. So if we did these in somewhat an order, we did Nintendo games. This was on YouTube. This is the first ranking stream I've done on Twitch. We did NES games, SNES games, JRPGs, sushi, fast food. I don't think I did ice cream. Which one is this? Candy. This was one Wazzy sent me, I think. We did candy. I think we did SMT games. I don't have all of them. I think I'm missing some of them. 80s movies, alcohol, and I think that's it. I think there's an SMT ranking. I didn't save it, though, I guess. You have to look at the stream archives over on YouTube. It's all there. All my embarrassing opinions are there. But yeah, if that's something you guys want me to do, I could create a tier list that's everything I've ranked so far. I could just scrub through the footage of what I did and maybe create some thumbnails for each one and put it into a tier list. And then you guys can rank how bad my opinions were. If that's something you want, then I can look at doing that. Hey, Mr. Dirtbones is here. Mr. Dirtbones says, Hey, Raku, lately I've been learning to walk down the stairs. Last time I only broke my leg. Well, it's good that you're learning how to walk downstairs, but be careful. I'm sure it takes a long time to mend broken bones, so don't get too injured. Especially if you live in the States, who has bad health care. Sourlad says, ever did a plug-and-play tier list? Plug-and-play as you mean like for peripherals? You're talking about like video game equipment and peripherals that plug in? I have not. And that would be interesting. I wonder if someone's done that, because I think Nintendo consoles have the most peripherals and random crap that you could plug in. The things like the Roland Rocker and like the speed board and all sorts of other stuff. A lot of that's been covered by the AVGN, so I guess I'd have to see what kind of list there was. Wazzy says, all of them are F except maybe Persona is C and Sushi is A. Oh, that's right. I did do a Persona. It was the Persona characters tier, right? Ranking characters in Persona or something like that. I don't remember. I think she's right, though. Sushi is A. So you liked my opinions on Sushi. You thought my Persona opinions were mid, and you hate my opinions on everything else, huh? Oh, I see. Sourlad said the games that have joysticks and buttons and just plug in audio and visual socket off a TV. So you're talking about those cheap knockoff, like bootleg things that are standalone that just plug into a TV and play. I have no experience with those. I think they're kind of a garbage product, so it wouldn't necessarily be much of a tier list. All right. Mr. Dirtbone says Payday 2 character tier list. I have not played Payday 2. I also wouldn't have much of an opinion on that. All right, let's finish up. We got TurboGrafx 16. I'm going to put TurboGrafx 16 at the bottom of B tier. This was another sort of extra competitor amongst the other game systems that didn't really pick up in the West. TurboGrafx 16 is that PC Engine in Japan? Yes. That system was more popular in Japan from what I gather. But it had some cool stuff. I think Bonk, the character Bonk, is from TurboGrafx 16. Kind of a neat product, just never caught on in the West, but had a good library of stuff on it. Sarlat says Namco plug and play where you play Pac-Man, Galaga, Mappy, and other games. Oh yeah, like I know about the plug and play stuff now that you've explained it better. It's just I don't have an opinion on them because I've never touched a lot of those. Again, they don't look like super compelling products. The later classic console things they've released, like the NES Classic, SNES Classic, Genesis, those I put in a different category than just like the cheap knockoff stuff you can get. There's some interesting ones. I think it was JonTron did a video on plug and play consoles. Chances are I wouldn't be able to do one without kind of rehashing what he's said already, so that's fine. Alright. Last console on the list, the Wii U. Is this going to be the last controversial opinion of the day? I'm going to put the Wii U on C tier. It's going to be above all these other ones. I justifiably couldn't put the Wii U higher than the Saturn, or this is the Neogeo, rather. But I couldn't put that higher than the other Xbox consoles, and this is the Saturn. Neogeo, Saturn. Mr. Dirtbone says, what's your opinion on meatloaf? I think it's fine, if done correctly. One of my favorite foods is technically a meatloaf. Euromeat. Euromeat's a meatloaf. Technically. Sarlat said, we had poor execution, the same mid-games. Yeah, the problem with the Wii U wasn't necessarily the power of the console or the games. It was just its execution and its marketing by Nintendo. The tablet was a bad piece of hardware. It was an interesting idea, but it wasn't executed well. It was bulky and it wasn't fun to play with. The game library itself was fine. I thought there were decent games on the Wii U. It had Bayonetta 2. That was a system seller for me. I bought a Wii U for Bayonetta, Wonderful 101, and Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate HD version. It had fine games. It just wasn't executed well, and I don't think Nintendo marketed it well at all. They didn't push to get it out there, and I get the feeling that even if they did, people would have gotten confused because they would have just thought it was a different version of the Wii. That was Nintendo's biggest mistake, calling it the Wii U when they should have called it something different. Like, it was Switch later, so maybe they should have called it the Nintendo Ultra Tablet, something that would distinguish it from the Wii. Because I know tons of people who said they didn't get a Wii U because they thought it was just an upgraded version of the Wii and didn't realize it was a separate console, a completely different platform with, different games and everything else. So they just didn't bother. And I think that's why it failed, because people weren't motivated to check it out and Nintendo didn't push it. Mr. Dirtbone says, thank God I didn't get political. I don't know if anybody else here has opinions on Meatloaf. I guess we can see. Sarlat says, cough, cough, Mario Party, 9 and 10. Animal Crossing Party, good games near the end of its life cycle. Yeah, like, there was good stuff on the Wii U. Again, it just wasn't executed well. And I'm not going to put a console on F tier if it had a good library and good things, but it just didn't get executed well. That applies to a lot of stuff on this list. Similar to the Dreamcast and the Gamecube, really. It wasn't until the Switch that Nintendo actually marketed it better. Wazzy says, it's meat in a loaf. What's the big hubbub? I don't think meatloaf is that controversial. I've had a really good recipe that was like a beef-based meatloaf, but it had like a spinach mix stuffed on the inside, and the whole thing was rolled. That was pretty good. But like I said before, Euro meat's technically a meatloaf, beef and lamb, ground beef, ground lamb, pureed. And that's really good. Mr. Dirtbone says, what about pineapple on pizza? Oh, now you went and gone political. Fortunately, that's not the first time we've discussed pineapple on pizza on my streams. I don't think it's going to be any less of an argument, but we have talked about it before, Mr. Dirtbones. Sour Lad says pineapple plus pepperoni pizza. Pineapple on its own is trash. I disagree. I think pineapple plus pepperoni on pizza is fine. Fresh pineapple by itself, fresh on a farm or chilled or grilled, is really good. I've never met a single person that's tried grilled pineapple like a Brazilian steakhouse type joint and didn't like it. Even Wazi, I think, would like it if she hasn't tried it before. I think people's impression of pineapple is, well, I don't speak for Wazi. She has a bit of a different opinion on it. But for most people that think pineapple is gross, unless they've had it fresh and can make an informed opinion, I think it's tainted by the fact that canned pineapple is disgusting. And canned pineapple is what they put on pizza. It'd be less disgusting if it wasn't baked, because baking it dries it out and makes it less gross. But if you made a pizza with fresh pineapple instead of grilled or instead of canned, it would be so much better, and I think people wouldn't have as much of an issue with it. But people get incredibly heated over pineapple on pizza, and I don't understand why. If you like it, great. If you don't like it, fine. But I don't see it as an affront against cuisine like some people. This is not talking about Wazi specifically. This is talking about people on the internet I've seen arguing about pineapple on pizza. To them, it's an insult to pizza, but it's like, you can put whatever you want. I have a friend of mine who likes anchovies on pizza, which I think is kind of gross, but I'm not going to fault someone for liking it. That's fine. Wazi says, have you seen how that plant grows? Pineapple is a bad plant. It grows like a cactus. It grows out of the ground in fields. If you think that's bad, then you shouldn't eat potatoes or corn or literally anything else that grows in a field out of the ground. That's not a good argument. Sour Lad says pineapple on pizza is not a war crime. Exactly. And I'm not talking about anybody here on the stream, so I'm not calling anybody here out, but people online will argue that pineapple on pizza is such an egregious war crime, and I don't understand why. They talk about the historical origins of pizza. What people eat outside of Italy for pizza is not historical anyway, so it doesn't matter. Just put whatever you want on your freaking pizza. It's not that big of a deal. Wazi says it also tries to eat your insides. That is something interesting. Before I heard that argument from Wazi, I hadn't really thought about the acidic nature of pineapple, but it, again, to me, not a big enough reason to not eat it. It's not going to eat you from the inside out. Wazi says only one pineapple per plant. It's not efficient. Yeah, that might be true, but it's like a watermelon or a pumpkin. They grow on a vine, but you only get one. I guess you get multiple per vine if you consider that one plant. But like garlic grows out of the ground too. You get one garlic bulb per plant. Or ginger's technically a root, but not efficient is a weird argument to hate a plant. If you go purely based on taste, fine. But yeah, Mr. Dirtbones asked a few lines up, what about mushrooms? I had no problem with mushrooms. I like mushrooms. I put mushrooms in my curry. Grilled mushrooms are good on burgers. Sauteed mushrooms are also good on burgers. I got no problem with mushrooms. I know some people don't like the texture. But yeah, they're fine. Let's see. Sour Lad says avocado need a lake amount of water. There's trees, right? avocados grow on trees. They're a fruit, technically, I think. Sourlad says, or Mr. Dirtbone says, okay, good. That was the second time I said something without it becoming political. Disagreement doesn't necessarily mean a bad thing, Mr. Dirtbones. I honestly do not care if people disagree with any of my opinions. If I did, I wouldn't do tier lists. The whole point is to have a good debate and a conversation. But even if someone doesn't agree, I'm always down to hear their rationale for why. It's perfectly fine. I might not agree, but that's also fine. Wazzy defends avocados. Sourlad says avocados need huge amounts of water. Yeah, you mentioned that, Sourlad, but is that a reason why you don't like avocados? Or is that just an observation? I can't tell your stance on avocados based on the fact that they require a lot of water, which I didn't know. That's new information to me. I like avocados. They're good on salads and sandwiches, and I do like guacamole. I see. So I think Sourlad's argument is that avocados are good, but they're not as efficient because of their demand for water. That's fair. Mr. Dirtbone says, hey, Araku, want a fun skeleton fact? Sure. Sure, hit me with a skeleton fact. Let's break up this heated debate about food, which we were talking about game consoles, and now we're talking about food. I guess it's inevitable. Wazzy says, well, they deserve it, and they're yummy. In regards to the avocados? I guess so. Edward says, to be honest, I can't remember the last time I watered an avocado. As opposed to the tree? Sourlad says, we have a limited amount of fresh water, and we are slowly contaminating them. Yeah, that resource conservation is something to think about when it comes to agriculture, I suppose. Wazzy says, free shavacado? Fresh avocado? Ah, there's the skeleton fact. Mr. Dirtbone says, fun skeleton fact. There are 2 types of bone. I didn't know that. I'm assuming that's composition. I don't know if cartilage counts as a bone, but good to know. Thanks for the fact. All right. So looking at the time, I did not think it would take almost 2.5 hours to talk about game consoles. I thought this was going to be a really quick exercise in just ranking things, but it turns out people have a lot of opinions on the console ranking. Wazzy says, this man doesn't know free Shavaka. No. Nope. That's lost on me, so you're going to have to explain the reference. But like I said, I put the link to this particular tier list in the chat. I encourage people to rank their game consoles and let me know where you put stuff. And also where you'd rank some of these other ones. Again, I haven't played these other ones. Obviously, PS5, a lot of people can rank. I just don't have one. With some of these other more obscure consoles, like this is the Master System, I think. This is Game & Watch. There's no... Is this Wonder Swan? I thought Wonder Swan was a different color. No, Wonder Swan doesn't look like that. I don't know what this is. Looks like a calculator. But yeah, I'll show you folks the tier list I was going to use. Let's see. What Sour Lad says he probably doesn't know about the Vine. Oh, is that it's from a Vine? That would explain why I don't recognize a reference. I don't Vine. Okay, Walsey sent it to me. I will watch that after the stream, and then I will be enlightened. Mr. Dirtbone says also a skeleton dies if the skull is broken. Ta-da! Skeleton fact. Well, you better be careful on the stairs then. You don't want your skull getting broken. That would be very bad. Let me pull up the other tier list. I'm not going to run through it. It would probably take as long as this one. But this is one hopefully I can do on the next stream. And this would be a good one to have when Naked Snake is here, because Naked Snake is a fighting games guy. This is a tier list of fighting games. And this big, massive block here is ones I haven't played. I'd done some sorting before in case I did this one today. But this is fighting games I've played have come out over the last probably 15 to 20 years. It's not everything, but it's a pretty comprehensive list. There's a lot of stuff on here I've never even heard of. But this tier would go away when I'm actually doing it, just so I'm not scrolling up and down through this whole thing. But there's tons. There's so many, dozens and dozens and dozens, and some that aren't even on the list. The ones to rank, let me scroll here, is what you see in the window here, starting with Soul Calibur 2. These are all the ones that I have to rank based on what I've played. So, yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot on here. And a lot of things I have strong opinions on too. So we will make that the subject of a future tier list stream. And if I'm going to get canceled for anything, especially if the fighting game community happens to see my tier list video, I'm sure it'll be this. They're very passionate. But that's fine. There's a lot of good conversation here. And this runs across indie to mainstream titles. That's why you see stuff like Skullgirls up against Mortal Kombat, up against Dive Kick, or Soul Calibur 6, and them's Fighting Herds. Just a whole lot. Walsey says, put P4AU in S where it belongs. Right here. We're not going to get into it now, but Persona Arena Ultimax would rank very high. I love that game to death. A few more weeks, I think. Comes out in March. I cannot wait to get back into that game and dust off Naoto. Skullgirls, very high up. Probably S tier. It's one of my favorite fighting games of all time. Them's Fighting Herds, which I haven't talked about on stream yet, but I will in the future. Pretty high up there. Smash Brothers. I'm probably going to get canceled for my opinion on Smash Brothers. Walsey says, Raku fight me. P4AU. Yeah, like I said, I think I was on stream with Matt last time. I want to get a fight club together for Persona 4 Arena Ultimax when it comes out. I don't know if we can organize that via Discord or through something separate, but I want to get, hopefully they have a lobby system in that game. I haven't played online in that game in years, but I want to get people together that have the game so we can play matches. So yeah. And even better if they end up adding rollback netcode like they should. But yeah, when this comes out, we'll get some content together for this because I think it'd be really fun. Just be prepared. Sarahlat said maybe play during Extra Life. We could do that too. If we can get enough people on board for Persona 4 Arena, and this is something for Wazi to consider. We could talk about it later, but maybe a P4AU tournament for Extra Life. If we can get enough people, that could be fun. It's going to be on Steam, so most people should be able to get it and play it. I can't imagine it being too demanding of a game to run, but maybe a tournament for something fun, and people can buy in to the tournament to contribute to Extra Life? Maybe. We'll see. I just hope it doesn't run like garbage online. But yeah. We shall see. Just throwing ideas out there. I know, like Wazzy is saying, the Extra Life stuff is still in development with her and Matt. So we shall see. But yeah, we will put a pin in fighting games and my terrible opinions for a future chill stream. Also the game controller one. That's also on the list. Wazzy says, I'll win. I button mash like a champ. We'll see. Who did you main in Persona again? Did you say Chie? I think you said you mained Chie. Correct me if I'm wrong. Unless you said you were at Yukiko main. I don't remember. I main Naoto. Naoto main, Chie secondary. Also like Kanji. The whole cast is a lot of fun. Should learn Akihiko. I don't know. I'm going to be doing some stuff with Persona when it comes out. So stay tuned. Wazzy says, ew, Yukiko. Yukiko in Persona Ultimax is so annoying to fight against because she's a zoner. I'm not a big fan of the Yukiko, just her character, but her as a fighting game character is so obnoxious because she'll just zone you out with her Persona and keep you at the other end of the screen. I hate playing against zoners because I usually play Rushdown. Naoto is like close range traps, not really Rushdown. Chie is 100% Rushdown. But yes, we will look at that in the future. But I think that will do it for today's chill stream. Let me go and see who's online to potentially raid. Thanks again for everyone for jumping on and putting up with my terrible opinions. It was fun to take a look at some of these old consoles and go through the handheld library. Digging all that stuff out of storage was interesting. I haven't looked at that in quite some time. But we will definitely be doing another one of these soon. Well, this is also Akihiko. Thanks for streaming. Sour Lad says, it was fun. Hope to join you next stream. Waz says you make bad life choices. Well, yeah, that's on brand for me at this point. Mr. Dirtbone says, hey, Rako, have you played Terraria? Yes, I have, but not recently, and I didn't play it a ton. I played Starbound more, but I did like Terraria. It is a fun game. All right, let me take a look at who's online. I don't see anybody from my friends list online. Let's see. I could go and look at the art people. Let me see if I can find a list real quick. Who is live doing art stuff? I am not good at navigating Twitch. I'm good at finding people I know, but as far as just rating random people, I'm not good at that. Let's see, 3D. I think I will go to the outro this time. I usually like to research people a little bit before I raid them, or unless you guys have any recommendations in the chat. I think we'll go ahead and wrap up for now. That's fine. I can always get some recommendations for next time and just put together a list. That's fine. So let's do this. We'll go to the outro and we'll wrap up. Watch says I don't have anyone live. That's fine. We don't need to raid someone every single time. I will always try if I can. But yeah, we'll go ahead and wrap up. So thanks again for everyone for hanging out. We will be back tomorrow with Vampire Survivors. So if you want to see some pain, then feel free to stop by. But until then, I will catch you folks later. So have a good evening.